The crystal glass chimed 3 times, sharp, piercing sounds that cut through the low murmur of conversation at the Thanksgiving table. I watched my son-in-law, Greg, rise from his chair at the head of the table, my chair, traditionally, though he'd usurped it tonight without asking. He smoothed the lapels of his $3,000 Italian suit, flashing that blinding, capped-tooth smile at my daughter, Emily, and then at the dozen or so guests scattered around my dining room. "I'd like to propose a toast," Greg announced, his voice booming with the confidence of a man who thinks he's untouchable. "To family, to legacy, and to the future of the Vance estate." He raised his wine glass, a vintage Bordeaux from my cellar that I hadn't given him permission to open, and locked eyes with me. There was a challenge in that look, a smugness that said, "You're old, Arthur. Your time is done. Step aside." My daughter smiled nervously, looking between her husband and me, praying for peace. She looked tired. God, she looked so tired. She had no idea what her husband had been doing behind her back. She didn't know about the second phone. She didn't know about the offshore accounts. And she certainly didn't know that the man she slept next to every night was a criminal who was about to lose everything. I didn't raise my glass. I just sat there, my hands resting quietly in my lap. Beneath the tablecloth, my fingers brushed against the rough edge of a thick manila envelope. Greg thought he was about to announce that he was taking over my finances. He thought he was giving a victory speech. He had no idea that I was holding his federal prison sentence in my hands. I stared right back at him, my face a mask of calm. I've been a poker player all my life, and I've spent 40 years as a forensic accountant hunting down corporate fraud. I know a bluff when I see one, and tonight I was going to call it. But not yet. Let him have his toast. Let him think he's won, because when the hammer drops, I want him to feel the height of the fall. Before I tell you what was in that envelope, and believe me, it's going to make your blood boil, I need you to ask you a favor. If you believe that justice should always be served, no matter who the criminal is, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. We tell stories here about real people fighting back against betrayal. Join us. Now, you might be thinking I should have thrown that envelope on the table right then and there, screamed at him, thrown him out. But you don't catch a rat by stomping around the barn. You wait, you watch, and you let them take the cheese. To understand how we got to this standoff over a turkey dinner, you have to understand something about my late wife, Sarah, because the truth is, she saw this coming 2 years ago. She tried to warn me from the grave, and like a fool, I almost didn't listen. I'm 75 years old. I made my money the hard way, staring at spreadsheets until my eyes bled, finding the nickels and dimes that corporate executives tried to hide in shell companies and phantom payrolls. I built a good life in Lake Forest, big house, portfolio of commercial real estate, a cabin up in Wisconsin. It was supposed to be for Sarah and me. We were going to travel. We were going to spend our golden years spoiling the grandkids. But life rarely sticks to the plan. Ovarian cancer took Sarah 2 years ago. It was a long, ugly battle. I'm not ashamed to say I cried every day for 6 months after the funeral. The silence in the house was deafening. It's a big place, 5,000 square feet, and without her laughter, it just felt like a museum of memories. That's when Greg really started to move in. Greg Miller. He married my Emily 10 years ago. On paper, he was a catch. He ran a boutique investment firm in downtown Chicago. He drove a new Porsche every 2 years. He bought the best golf clubs, wore the best watches. But something about him always rubbed me the wrong way. In my line of work, you develop a gut instinct for people who live beyond their means. You notice the little things, the way they sweat when the check comes, the way they brag a little too loudly about a huge deal that's just around the corner. But Emily loved him, and he gave me 2 beautiful grandchildren. So I kept my mouth shut. I played the role of the supportive father-in-law. About 6 months after Sarah died, Greg started coming around more often.
At first, I thought he was just being supportive. He'd come over on Saturdays, watch the game, drink my scotch. He'd offer to help organize the office. "Arthur, you really shouldn't be worrying about property taxes at your age. I've got a team at the firm who could handle all this for you, automate it, optimize the tax liabilities." "I like doing the books, Greg," I told him, keeping my voice even. Sure, he said, waving a hand dismissively, "but you've earned a rest. Emily worries, you know. She thinks it's too much for you alone in this big house. Have you thought about downsizing? Maybe moving into one of those luxury senior communities? They're like resorts, really." The hair on the back of my neck stood up. Downsizing. That was the first time he said it. It wouldn't be the last. I looked at him, really looked at him. He was smiling, but his eyes weren't. They were scanning the room, appraising the furniture, calculating the square footage. He wasn't looking at a home, he was looking at an asset. "I'm not going anywhere, Greg," I said firmly. "This is Sarah's house. It's my house." He dropped it then, raising his hands in mock surrender. "Just looking out for you, Arthur, that's all. We're family." Family. That word used to mean everything to me. Blood is thicker than water, as the saying goes, but I've learned the hard way that sometimes family are just the people close enough to stab you in the back. I didn't know it then, but the wheels were already turning in his head. He was already drowning in debt, and he looked at me and saw a life raft made of cash. I was just an obstacle to be removed. Little did I know, this conversation was the beginning of a war, and the first shot was fired 3 days after the second anniversary of Sarah's death, when a courier arrived at my door with a letter I never expected to see. I signed for the package, my hand shaking just a little. The return address was Henderson and Associates, our family law firm for 30 years. But inside the heavy cardboard mailer was a smaller cream-colored envelope. I recognized the handwriting instantly. It was Sarah's. Elegant, slanted script that I hadn't seen since the last birthday card she wrote me before the chemo took away her fine motor skills. The front of the envelope read, "To be opened 2 years after my passing, or immediately if Greg asks to sell the lake house." My breath hitched in my throat. Just that morning, over coffee, Greg had dropped by. He'd casually mentioned that the market in Wisconsin was hot and that the lake house was just sitting there gathering dust. He suggested he could find a buyer within the week. I sat down at the kitchen table, the silence of the house pressing in on me. I slit the envelope open with a butter knife. "My dearest Arthur," the letter began, "I hope you're doing better than I am right now. I hope you're eating properly and not just living on frozen dinners." I smiled through a sudden blur of tears. Even from beyond, she was nagging me about my diet. But the tone of the letter shifted quickly. "I need to tell you something I didn't have the heart to say while I was sick. I didn't want to cause a rift between Emily and us, but Arthur, you need to be careful with Greg. I've seen things. When you were at the office, he'd come over. He'd ask questions about the trust. I caught him once in your study, looking through your bank statements. He said he was looking for a pen, but he was holding your bank statements." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. "I don't trust him, Arthur," she wrote. "He's desperate to look successful, and men like that are dangerous. Please promise me you won't give him power of attorney. Protect what we built. Protect Emily from him." I lowered the letter. My hands were trembling, but not from grief this time. It was rage. Sarah had spent her final months worrying about this leech instead of finding peace, and I had been blind. But was I being fair? Maybe Sarah was confused near the end. Maybe the medication made her paranoid. I wanted to believe that. I wanted to believe my daughter hadn't married a man who would rifle through a dying woman's home for financial data. I decided to test the waters. I needed to see if Sarah's instinct was right, or if this was just a misunderstanding.
A few days later, I invited Emily and Greg over for a barbecue. It was a beautiful Sunday afternoon. I was grilling steaks, trying to act like everything was normal. Greg was on the patio, pacing back and forth with his cell phone pressed to his ear.
"I told you, the liquidity is coming," I heard him hiss. His voice was low, tight with anger. "Stop threatening me, Mike. You'll get your return. Just give me 2 weeks." He stopped pacing when he saw me watching through the sliding glass door. Instantly, the scowl vanished. He hung up the phone and flashed that practiced, winning smile. "Work trouble?" I asked as I brought the platter of steaks out. "Oh, you know how it is, Arthur," he laughed, slapping me on the shoulder a little too hard. "Market volatility. Clients get nervous. Just have to hold their hands a bit." "Sounds stressful," I said, watching him closely. "It's the price of success," he said, taking a beer from the cooler. Then he looked me right in the eye. "Speaking of success, Arthur, I've been looking at your portfolio again. You're heavily weighted in low-yield bonds. I really think we should liquidate some of those and move them into my firm's aggressive growth fund. I could probably get you a 20% return this year." There it was, the ask. "I'm happy with my bonds, Greg," I said, flipping a steak. "They're safe." "Safe doesn't pay for inflation," he pressed, his voice getting an edge to it. "And with the cost of maintaining this place, look, I'm just saying Emily is worried. She thinks you're overwhelmed. If you let me handle the accounts, you wouldn't have to worry about a thing." I said no, Greg. His smile faltered. For a split second, the mask slipped completely. His eyes went cold, dead. It wasn't the look of a concerned son-in-law. It was the look of a desperate animal looking at a locked cage. "Fine," he snapped. "Suit yourself, but don't come crying to me when the market turns and you lose half your value." Stop. I need you to understand something right now. That moment, that flash of anger, was the mistake that cost him everything. If he had just backed off, played the long game, he might have gotten away with it, but he pushed too hard. And in that moment, I didn't see my son-in-law anymore. I saw every embezzler, every con artist, and every fraudster I'd spent 40 years putting behind bars. The writing was on the wall. Sarah was right. That night, after they left, I didn't go to sleep. I went to my study. I locked the door. I poured myself a black coffee, put on my reading glasses, and dusted off my old laptop. It had been 5 years since I retired, but you don't forget how to follow the money. It's like riding a bike, only the bike is a spreadsheet, and the pavement is a paper trail. I logged into my primary checking account. Everything looked fine. The pension deposits were there, the utility bills were paid. Greg hadn't touched the main account. He was too smart for that. He knew I balanced that checkbook every month. But then I navigated to the Sarah Vance Revocable Trust. It was a side account we used for the grandkids' college funds and maintenance on the lake house. It was supposed to have a balance of roughly $200,000. I clicked on Transaction History. My heart hammered against my ribs as the screen loaded. The balance was $142,000. Where did 60 grand go? I whispered to the empty room. I scrolled down. The withdrawals weren't large. They were insidious. $4,900. Transfer to external account ending in 8842. $4,900. Transfer to external account ending in 8842. $4,500. Check number 1044 cleared. They were all under $5,000, small enough that they wouldn't trigger immediate fraud alerts from the bank's automated systems, small enough that if I just glanced at the bottom line, I might not panic immediately. But looking at the dates, they started 3 weeks after Sarah died. He had been stealing from me while I was picking out my wife's headstone. I stared at the screen until the numbers blurred. This wasn't just theft. This was structuring. It's a federal crime to break up transactions to avoid reporting requirements. Greg wasn't just a bad investor. He was a criminal. I printed the pages. The printer whirring in the quiet office sounded like a tank rolling into battle. I had the what. Now I needed the who. I needed to prove that account 8842 belonged to him, and I needed to know how deep this rot went. But I couldn't do it alone. I needed someone who knew where the bodies were buried, or at least where the passwords were kept. I reached for the phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in 2 years. "Martha?" I said when the groggy voice answered on the third ring. "It's Arthur. I know it's late, but I need you to come over tomorrow. We have work to do." Martha arrived at 8 a.m. sharp the next morning, carrying a box of glazed donuts and a look that could strip paint. She was 72, stood 5'0", and had the gatekeeper to my office for 32 years. She knew where every skeleton in my professional life was buried, mostly because she'd filed the paperwork for the graves. "I brought coffee," she said, marching past me into the kitchen, "and I brought my reading glasses. Tell me Sarah was right. Tell me that weasel is stealing from me." I laid the trust account printouts on the table. Martha adjusted her glasses, took one look at the structured withdrawals, and let out a low whistle. "Lazy," she muttered. "He's using round numbers. Amateurs always use round numbers because they think it looks cleaner. But life isn't clean. Life has sense. He's smart enough to stay under the $10,000 reporting limit. Smart enough to be dangerous, dumb enough to leave a trail. So he's skimming cash. Why? He drives a Porsche. He wears suits that cost more than my first car. Why risk federal prison for $5,000 here and $5,000 there? That's what we need to find out. If he's just greedy, that's one thing. But if he's desperate, that's a whole different animal. A desperate man is capable of anything." We spent the next 3 hours turning my home office upside down. We weren't just looking for receipts. We were looking for the why. Martha cross-referenced Greg's business trips with the dates of the withdrawals. "Look at this," she said, pointing a manicured nail at the calendar. "June 12th, withdrawal of $4,900. June 13th, Greg posts a photo on Facebook from a golf resort in Arizona. But look at the credit card bill for the family joint account." I looked. No flight to Arizona, no hotel charge. "He didn't go to Arizona," I said, the realization dawning on me. "He stayed local. So where did he go? And who is he paying?" Martha added. We were building a picture, but it was like a jigsaw puzzle with half the pieces missing. I felt a headache coming. I needed air. I walked over to the window and looked out at the guest house across the lawn. Greg and Emily had been staying there on weekends while they renovated their kitchen in the city. "He's not here today," I murmured. "Emily is at yoga. Greg is at the firm. And I bet he left his laptop or some paperwork in there," she said, tapping a finger on the window. "He treats this place like his personal hotel." I hesitated. "That's invading their privacy, Martha." She looked at me over the rim of her glasses. "Arthur Vance, that man stole $40,000 from your grandkids' trust fund. He gave up his right to privacy the moment he dipped his hand in the cookie jar." She was right. God, I missed Sarah, but having Martha around was the next best thing. We walked across the lawn. The guest house was unlocked. Arrogant. Greg didn't think he needed to lock doors here because he owned the place, or thought he did. Inside, it was a mess. Greg's clothes were draped over the furniture. His workstation was set up on the dining table. I started sifting through the papers on the desk. Just standard marketing fluff for his investment firm. Miller Capital, secure your future. Irony is dead, I thought. But what I found next would change the entire trajectory of my investigation. We were looking for financial records, but we stumbled onto something much darker, a secret that explained exactly why Greg was bleeding me dry. I sat at the desk and felt something loose underneath the top drawer. I reached under. Tape. Duct tape. I pulled hard. A small black smartphone came away in my hand. It wasn't his sleek new iPhone. It was an older model, a burner phone. Why would an investment banker need a burner phone taped under a desk in his father-in-law's guest house? Check the messages, Martha whispered.
I pressed the power button. It was locked with a passcode. I thought for a second. Greg was a narcissist. I tried his birthday. Nothing. I tried Emily's birthday. Nothing. Then I tried the date he opened his firm. Click. The home screen opened. I went straight to the text messages. There were dozens of them, all from unsaved numbers. I started reading and my blood ran cold. Unknown. Greg, it's been 3 weeks. Where's my dividend? Unknown. I'm calling the SEC if I don't see the wire by Friday. Unknown. You said the returns were guaranteed. My wife needs that money for surgery. Don't ghost me. And then a sent message from Greg dated yesterday. Just hold on. I'm liquidating a major asset. The transfer happens next week. I'll have everyone's capital plus 10%. Trust me. He's running a Ponzi scheme, I said, my voice barely a whisper. He's paying old investors with new money, but the new money dried up. So he's using your money to plug the holes, Martha realized, horror on her face. He's not just stealing a little off the top, Arthur. He needs millions. He needs the whole estate. He needs to liquidate a major asset, I repeated his text. He's talking about the lake house, or maybe my portfolio. But he can't sell those, Martha said. Everything is in your name. He'd need... She stopped. We both looked at each other. Power of attorney, we said in unison. We need to check your computer again, I said, standing up so fast I knocked the chair over. The main network. He was on it last week when I was napping. He said he was updating the drivers. We rushed back to the main house. I felt a sense of urgency I hadn't felt since my days uncovering fraud at Enron. This wasn't just theft anymore. This was an existential threat. If Greg got legal control over me, he could drain everything I'd worked 50 years to build, flush it down the toilet of his failed business, and leave me destitute in a state-run nursing home. I sat down at my desktop and pulled up the network history. I searched for any files created or scanned in the last month. There was a folder buried deep in the system directory labeled A.V.Medical Records Backup. I don't have digital medical records. My doctor still uses a fax machine. I double-clicked the folder. Inside was a single PDF file, Vance POA executed.pdf. I opened it, and my heart stopped, because what was supposed to be inside, maybe a draft, maybe a blank form, wasn't just a draft. It was a full, durable power of attorney granting Gregory Miller complete control over my finances, real estate, and health care decisions. And at the bottom of the last page, clear as day, was my signature. I stared at it. It looked exactly like my signature, the loop of the A, the sharp cross of the T, but I knew with absolute certainty that I had never signed this document. Look at the date, Martha pointed out, her finger trembling against the screen. September 14th, I read. Arthur, she said softly, September 14th was the day you had your hip replacement surgery. You were under general anesthesia until 4 p.m. He forged it, I said. He must have traced it while I was out of it, or used a digital stamp. It's notarized, Martha noted. See the stamp? Lisa G. Davis, Notary Public. I know Lisa. She works at the bank downtown. She's honest. She wouldn't notarize a signature without seeing the person sign it. Unless she was tricked, or unless he's got her in his pocket too, I finished. I sat back, the magnitude of it hitting me like a physical blow. He already had the weapon. He was just waiting for the right moment to pull the trigger. And if I confronted him now, he'd just file the document, claim I was incompetent, and use my paranoia as proof that he needed to take over immediately. I looked at Martha. She looked at me. We can't tell him we know, she said. Not yet. No, I agreed, a cold calm settling over me. If we strike now, we miss. We need to catch him trying to use it. We need to let him think he's won. But little did I know, Greg wasn't waiting for next week. He was already making his move. The next morning, the war moved from my bank accounts to my kitchen table.
I woke up at 6 a.m., same as always, ready to drive to the bank to flag the trust account activity. I reached for my car keys in the ceramic bowl by the door where they have lived for 30 years. The bowl was empty. I checked my pockets, my nightstand, the kitchen counters. Nothing. "Looking for these, Arthur?" I turned. Greg was standing in the kitchen doorway, holding my keys. He was wearing his running gear, looking fresh and energetic, while I stood there in my robe, feeling suddenly frail. "Where were they?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "In the refrigerator," he said, shaking his head with a sad, pitying smile. "You must have put them there when you got your water last night." "I didn't put them there, Greg," I said coldly. "It's okay, Arthur," he said, his voice dropping to that patronizing tone people use with toddlers. "It happens. We all get a little forgetful, especially with all the stress you've been under." He walked past me and placed the keys back in the bowl, patting my shoulder as he went. "Maybe you shouldn't drive today. I can take you where you need to go." "I am perfectly capable of driving myself," I snapped, snatching the keys. "Dad!" I froze. Emily was standing on the stairs, holding her morning coffee. She looked from Greg to me, worry etching lines into her forehead. "Dad, why are you shouting?" she asked softly. "I'm not shouting," I said, conscious of how defensive I sounded. "Greg hid my keys in the refrigerator." Greg sighed, a long, suffering sound. "I didn't hide them, Em. I found them there. I was just suggesting maybe he'd take it easy today. He seems agitated." Emily looked at me, and in her eyes I didn't see my daughter looking at her father. I saw a woman looking at a burden. I saw the doubt. "Maybe Greg is right, Dad. You have been forgetting things lately. Last week you forgot our lunch date." "I didn't forget," I insisted. "Greg told you rescheduled." "I never said that, Arthur," Greg lied smoothly, not even blinking. I looked at him and I realized what he was doing. He wasn't just trying to make me feel crazy. He was building a case. He needed a witness when he filed that power of attorney. He needed Emily to believe I was incompetent so she wouldn't fight him when he took control. My chest tightened, not from heart trouble, but from pure heartbreak. I'm telling you this because maybe someone watching is going through the same thing right now. Maybe you've seen that look in your child's eyes, that shift from respect to pity. It cuts deeper than any knife. I've faced down aggressive lawyers and hostile witnesses, but seeing my own daughter look at me like I was a broken appliance, that brought me to my knees. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake her and tell her that she was married to a viper. But I knew if I lost my temper now, I'd just prove Greg right. See, he's unstable. He's aggressive. It's the dementia. So I swallowed the rage. I forced myself to take a deep breath. "I'm fine, Emily," I said, my voice calm again. "Just a misunderstanding. I'm going to the library." I didn't go to the library. I drove straight to the office of Dr. Silas Evans, a neurologist I've known for 20 years. "Arthur," Silas looked up at his desk as I barged in past his receptionist, "I don't have you on the schedule." "I need a cognitive evaluation, Silas," I said, closing the door behind me. "The full battery, mocha, slums, everything you've got." "Why?" he asked, taking off his glasses. "Because my son-in-law is trying to convince my daughter that I'm losing my mind, and I need medical proof that I'm the sanest person in that house." Silas stared at me for a moment. Then he reached for a scheduling pad. "Sit down." For the next 2 hours, I underwent the most humiliating tests of my life, counting backwards from 100 by sevens, remembering lists of random words, drawing clocks, identifying animals. I focused with the intensity of a laser. I wasn't just taking a test. I was fighting for my life. When it was over, Silas tallied the score. He looked up and smiled. 30 out of 30, Arthur. You're sharper than most 40-year-olds I see." "Put it in writing, notarized, time-stamped, today's date." I walked out of that office clutching the affidavit like a shield. I had my defense. Now I needed to go on the offense. I met Martha at a diner on the edge of town. She had been busy too. I checked the county clerk's website, she said, sliding a tablet across the table. Greg didn't just forge the POA. Look what he did this morning. I looked at the screen. A lis pendens, a notice of pending legal action, had been filed on the lake house property. He's not waiting for the POA to kick in, Martha said grimly. He's trying to cloud the title so you can't sell it or borrow against it. He's boxing you in. He needs that money to pay off his investors, I said, connecting the dots. He's trying to freeze the asset so he can rescue it later. And there's more, Martha said. I called my friend at the bank, the one who works in the fraud department. She said someone tried to access your safe deposit box this morning. They were turned away because they didn't have the key. My hand went to my pocket. The key was still there, but Greg knew about the box. He knew that's where I kept the deeds, the original trust documents, and the diamond necklace Sarah wanted Emily to have on her 40th birthday. He's getting desperate, I said. The investors must be squeezing him hard. What are you going to do? Martha asked. I'm going to let him think he's winning. I'm going to go home, act confused, and let him think his gaslighting is working. I want him to get overconfident. I want him to bring everyone together for his big victory lap. Thanksgiving, Martha realized. It's in 3 days. Exactly, I said. He's invited his business partners. He wants to show off. He wants to announce that I'm stepping down and handing the reins to him. It's going to be a bloodbath, Martha said, a gleam in her eye. No, I corrected her, it's going to be an audit. But I underestimated Greg one last time. I thought I had 3 days to prepare. I thought the battlefield was set. But when I got home that afternoon, my key wouldn't turn in the lock. I tried the back door. Locked. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Emily. Dad, Greg says it's not safe for you to be alone right now. We're taking you to stay at the Harborview Center for a few days for observation. Please don't make this difficult. It's for your own good. I stared at the phone. Harborview wasn't a hotel. It was a high-security memory care facility. Greg wasn't waiting for Thanksgiving. He was removing me from the board entirely. I stood on my own front porch, locked out of my house I built, with a car pulling into the driveway behind me. It was a private ambulance. This wasn't a game anymore. This was a kidnapping disguised as medical care. And I had about 30 seconds to decide if I was going to go quietly or if I was going to start the war right here on the front lawn. 2 large men in scrubs stepped out of the van. They weren't smiling. One of them, a guy with a crew cut and arms the size of hams, held a clipboard. Mr. Vance, he asked, we're here to take you to Harborview. Your family is very concerned. Greg stepped out from the side of the house, his face a mask of fake concern. It's okay, Dad. Just go with them. They'll get you the help you need. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my voice was ice. I am not going anywhere. Sir, we have a request from your power of attorney, the EMT said, reaching for my arm. I stepped back. Do not touch me. I reached into my jacket pocket, not for a weapon, but for the piece of paper I'd secured only hours ago. I snapped Dr. Evans' affidavit open and shoved it into the EMT's chest. Read it, I commanded. That is a notarized cognitive evaluation from a board-certified neurologist, time-stamped 2 hours ago. I scored 30 out of 30. I am perfectly sane, fully competent, and if you put one hand on me, I will sue you, your company, and this man individually for kidnapping and false imprisonment. The EMT paused. He looked at the paper, then at Greg, then back at me. He saw the fire in my eyes. He saw that I wasn't a confused old man. I was a man who knew his rights. Sir, the EMT asked Greg, holding up the paper, this says he's fine. We can't take him against his will without a court order or a police officer present. Greg's face turned a shade of purple I'd never seen before. The mask crumbled completely. He faked that. He's manipulating you. Grab him. We're leaving, the EMT said, handing the clipboard back to his partner. Call the police if you want to dispute it, but we're not getting involved in a domestic dispute. They got back in the van and drove off. I stood there on the driveway, chest heaving, staring at Greg. He looked like a cornered rat. "You underestimated me," I said softly. He sneered. "You think this is over? You think a piece of paper saves you? I've already filed the guardianship petition, Arthur. The hearing is Tuesday. By next week, you'll be in a home and I'll be sitting in your office." "Get out of my way," I said, brushing past him to unlock the door with the key he thought I'd lost. I walked into my kitchen, locked the door behind me, and slumped against it. My hands were shaking uncontrollably now. I'd won the skirmish, but the war was far from over. Now, before I tell you what Greg did next, because believe me, he didn't stop there, let me take a second to breathe. If you're enjoying this story, if you want to see Greg get exactly what he deserves, do me a favor, hit the like button. It helps get this story out to more people who need to know how to spot a wolf in sheep's clothing. And check out the link in the description if you want to support the channel further. Okay, let's finish this. I poured myself a glass of water, my hand still trembling. I needed to call my lawyer. I needed to freeze Greg out before Tuesday. I picked up the landline. Dead. No dial tone. I pulled out my cell phone. No service. My stomach dropped. He'd cut the lines. He'd reported my phone stolen or shut off the service. He was trying to isolate me again. Then the house Wi-Fi cut out. The lights flickered and died. He was cutting the utilities. He was trying to flush me out like an animal. But he forgot one thing. I grew up in a house without AC. I camped in Vietnam. I didn't need Wi-Fi to fight a war. I went to my study and pulled out the emergency satellite phone Sarah insisted we buy for our trips to the cabin. I dialed Martha. "He tried to have me committed," I told her, my voice tight. "He failed, but he's cut the power in the phones. I'm besieged in my own house." "Arthur," Martha's voice cracked, "it's worse than that. I tried to transfer the retainer to the attorney we spoke about. The bank declined it." "What?" "Your accounts are frozen, Arthur. The bank received a temporary emergency order this afternoon. The judge signed it ex parte, without you there, because Greg claimed you were liquidating assets due to dementia. You can't access a dime." I stared at the darkened room. I was worth millions, and I couldn't buy a loaf of bread. "Okay," I said, a strange calm settling over me. "He thinks he's cut off my supply lines. He thinks I'm starving, but he doesn't know I have reserves." "What do you need?" Martha asked. "I've got $40,000 in my savings. It's yours." "Keep your money, Martha. I have the rainy day cash in the floor safe he doesn't know about. But I need you to do something else. I need you to find out who is coming to Thanksgiving dinner." "Why?" "Because Greg is arrogant. He told me he's bringing investors. If I know him, he's trying to land one big whale to bail him out of his Ponzi scheme. He's going to use my estate as the bait. I need to know who the mark is." Martha called me back 2 hours later. I hacked his secretary's email. Don't ask me how. The password was money123. The guest list includes a Mr. Robert Sterling. "Bob Sterling," I laughed, a harsh barking sound. "The construction magnate? That's the one." "Oh, Greg," I whispered, "you picked the wrong fish." Bob Sterling wasn't just rich, he was old Chicago money. He was tough, smart, and notoriously litigious. If Greg tried to scam Bob Sterling using my money, and I exposed it, Bob wouldn't just sue him, Bob would destroy him. "Perfect," I said. "Martha, are you still friends with the caterer Emily uses, Sally? We play bridge on Tuesdays." "Good. I need you to get a message to Sally. Tell her I have a special request for the AV setup at dinner." Thanksgiving was tomorrow. The house was dark, my money was frozen, my daughter thought I was insane, and my son-in-law thought he had already won. He was going to walk into that dining room expecting a coronation. He was going to find an execution. I sat in the dark, eating a cold sandwich, watching the lights of Greg's guest house burning brightly across the lawn. I could see shadows moving. He was probably drinking champagne, toasting his genius.
"Enjoy it, Greg," I whispered, "because tomorrow
You're going to learn that the numbers never lie, and neither do I. Which brings us back to the moment I told you about at the beginning. The crystal glass chiming, the smell of turkey and expensive perfume, the heavy, expectant silence in the room. Greg finished his toast, raising his glass high. "To the transition," he beamed, looking at Bob Sterling. "Arthur has graciously agreed to let Miller Capital modernize the estate's management. It's a bold new chapter." He turned to me, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Arthur, would you like to say a few words? Maybe give us your blessing?" This was it. He was publicly cornering me. If I refused, I looked petulant and confused. If I agreed, I sealed my fate. I stood up slowly, leaning on the cane I didn't really need but brought for effect. I reached under the table, grabbed the envelope, and placed it next to my plate. Then I picked up the small remote control Sally the caterer had slipped me along with my napkin. "I do have a few words, Greg," I said, my voice clear and strong, "and I have a presentation." Presentation?" Greg faltered, glancing at the 60-inch television mounted above the fireplace, the one usually reserved for football games. "I'm an accountant, Bob," I said, nodding to Sterling. "We don't do blessings. We do audits." I pointed the remote. Click. The TV screen flickered to life, but it wasn't a football game. It was a clear, high-resolution scan of my bank statement, specifically the Sarah Vance Trust. The room went dead silent. "Here's where I turn the tables," I said calmly, looking Greg in the eye. "What you're seeing are $48,000 in structured withdrawals, specifically designed to stay under federal reporting limits, all funneled to an account ending in 8842. Greg's face went from tan to a sickly shade of gray. "Arthur, this is inappropriate. We can discuss finances later." Click. The screen changed. It was a photo of the burner phone, followed by the transcript of the text messages. "I need the money by Friday or I call the SEC. Just hold on, I'm getting control of the estate next week." "That's a lie," Greg shouted, standing up and knocking his chair over. "He fabricated that. He's senile. Emily, stop him." Emily didn't move. She was staring at the screen, her hand covering her mouth, tears streaming down her face as she read the words. "Sit down, son," Bob Sterling rumbled. He hadn't moved a muscle, but his voice carried the weight of a man who owned half the city's concrete. "I want to see the rest." "You don't want to see this, Bob, because the account 8842, that's not an investment fund. That's a slush fund used to pay off previous investors. It's a Ponzi scheme, Bob, and you were the next mark." Greg lunged for the remote, but he didn't get far. Two men who had been standing quietly in the kitchen doorway, men who weren't caterers, stepped forward. One was Agent Miller from the FBI. I'd worked with him on the Enron case 15 years ago. "Gregory Miller," the agent said, flashing his badge. "Step away from Mr. Vance." Greg froze. He looked around the room, wild-eyed. He looked at Bob Sterling, whose face was pure granite. He looked at Emily. Baby," he pleaded, reaching out. "It's all a misunderstanding. I did it for us. I did it to build a future." Emily stood up. She walked over to him, her eyes red but her jaw set in a line of granite that she must have inherited from her mother. She didn't scream. She didn't slap him. "You tried to put my father in a home. You tried to make me believe he was crazy. You stole from my children." She took her wedding ring off and dropped it into his wine glass. Clink. "Get out of my house," she said.
The agents didn't give him a choice. They cuffed him right there between the mashed potatoes and the cranberry sauce. As they dragged him out, shouting about his rights and his lawyers, I just watched. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt tired. It's been 6 months since that night. The fallout was messy, as these things always are. Greg is currently awaiting trial on 14 counts of wire fraud, elder abuse, and identity theft. Bob Sterling is testifying for the prosecution. The investment firm collapsed within 48 hours. Emily moved back in with me for a while, along with the grandkids. We're rebuilding. She feels guilty, terribly guilty, for believing him over me, but I tell her every day that master manipulators are good at what they do. It wasn't her fault. We're working on it. I visited Sarah's grave this morning. The wind was coming off the lake, cold and biting, but the sun was shining. I traced the letters of her name on the stone. You were right, Sarah. I should have listened sooner. But we got him, Sarah. The house is safe. The kids are safe. I'm telling you this story not because I want sympathy or praise. I'm telling you because I'm 75 and I almost let a wolf take everything because I was too polite to close the gate. Don't ignore the red flags. Don't let anyone tell you that family business should stay private when money starts missing. And never ever let anyone underestimate you just because you have gray hair. Trust, but verify, and always keep the receipts. Thanks for watching. If you want to see more stories where the bad guys get exactly what's coming to them, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. There's a lot of wolves out there, and we've got a lot more stories to tell. Stay safe, watch your six, and take care of your family, the real ones. Arthur, signing off.